All right, let's get started.
Yeah.
All right, I'm saying the bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'suk b'divrei Torah. Barev na Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Torah Kabb b'finu fiyim chabeit Yisrael. V'niyeh anachnu v'tzeitzeinu v'tzeitzeim chabeit Yisrael. Kulanu yodea shemecha v'lomdei Toratech lishma baruch atah Adonai l'mei Torah l'mo Yisrael.
Amen.
Okay, guys, what I want to do is just go through our halacha quickly. Let me just see. Can you see me? Is any part of my body being chopped off?
No.
Okay, good.
You look really good.
All right. So listen, we were discussing in the Kids Shulchan Aruch. We're going on with Al Netilat Yadayim, and every day what we're doing is we're posing different problems that you're going to face. We're not learning the halacha in a way that's generally described. You know what I'm saying? This is not static or boring. These are situations we find ourselves in all the time. These comedic situations. So Rabbi Zaltz has been amazing. This is in his merit. All right. So let's say you need the loo. You need to go to the bathroom, and now you have to wash your hands for Al Netilat Yadayim. Now, generally, one should go to be able to plan their bathroom trips well, but when the need calls, the need calls. So where do you have a problem? You have a problem where when you come out from the toilet and you've done a number 2, you have to say that bracha asher yatzar. Is everybody aware what that bracha is? Oh, do you know what that bracha is?
Yes, I know which one it is.
Okay, so it's a bracha to thank Hashem for opening all your cavities and that you don't have any internal blockages, etc., etc. So the problem
because anyway blocked, I couldn't serve you, etc.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the problem is if you vas for that particular bracha, you can't then vas for hamotzi. Why can't you vas for hamotzi? Anybody got a reason that you think for the sheyatzar?
Your hands are clean already?
Correct, exactly. So your hands are clean already. So what happens there is you have to vas in a different way, okay? And you can't do the hamotzi first, the Al Netilat Yadayim, because there can't be a hefsek, a delay between Al Netilat Yadayim and hamotzi, which is why we don't talk in between. So there's a very, very simple way to solve the problem, okay? So in the old days, what they used to do is they'd wash one hand and then rub their hands together. So that doesn't mimic being halachically within the parameters of Al Netilat Yadayim. Do you get what I'm saying? Because you have to pour a certain amount of water on each hand. So you put water on one hand, and then you rub your other hand with it together. You say Asher Yatzar, and then you vas properly for Hamotzi. Okay. Now, I don't know if you've seen, a lot of people make the mistake of using a negel vasa when they're doing Asher Yatzar beforehand. You're not supposed to use that for Asher Yatzar, a negel vasa. Okay? So what you do today is you've got no issues. You can use a tap. Remember we learned yesterday that you can't use a tap, technically. When you're vassing your hands, because you need your own force in order to be yoetzi al netilat yadayim. So if you wash your hands under a tap directly, where you're not pouring your water from one hand to another, you then can say the brocha after you've gone to the loo, and then you dry your hands properly, and then you vas according to the edict of what's required for Al Netilat Yadayim, and you say Al Netilat Yadayim. Any questions, guys?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Is it only for number Damon? You said only number 2. Number 1 is Asher Yatzar for everything.
Not there are different opinions.
I say it for 1 as well.
Okay, so they're different opinions. We're going to go through the 1 and 2 opinion. The 2 different opinions, whether it's a 1 or a 2 or 2 and a 1.
If it's a 1, you should wash your hands before.
Oh. All right.
No, I'm just saying.
All right. So whether or not you go for a urination or defecation, that's the argument. Let's get on to the shir. Marco, are you okay? Marco?
Ja, she's Alba.
Yeah.
Marco?
Sorry, I just had a
can't hear you.
I had a phone call I had to divert.
No problem. Sorry, man.
No problem.
All right, so a separate halacha, we're going to deal with a share yatzah if it's for urination or defecation or both, on the 1 and 2 issue and the different halachic opinions. Okay, so let's just get back to it. Kevin asked me a question on the WhatsApp quickly, and we're going to spend no more than about a minute or two on this because we need to go on. Kevin wasn't quite sure, which is a natural question, Kevin, by the way, that many people ask, is what's the connection with a amniotic sac with an animal, versus a human woman? You couldn't see the connection. Is that the question?
Yeah.
Is that the question? Does that make sense?
What was the comparison done, and what was the point of the whole?
All right, let me give you a bottom line, guys. That this is it. In a birth, you can see if it's a boy or a girl. If it's a boy, there's 7 days of tumah, and for a girl, there's 14 days. 14 days for a girl, because a woman that had the potential for holding life of another girl that had herself potential for holding life is a more stringent form of tumah, because she was on a higher level of kedusha than when she was pregnant with a boy. Fine, so that's for a live birth. On a live birth, when the baby pops out is when the period, when you consider the actual astrological period of time, etc. Again, if it's a clear day of when she popped out, we know how to count the period of time. Okay, so it's at that time. But with a miscarriage, we're not sure what's going on. We say it's about the amniotic sac. If the majority comes out, that's the day that woman is tumah. Okay. Now, what we said is when a fetus is dissolved in the amniotic sac, how does this occur? Well, generally, if it's just over 40 days, the fetus isn't fully formed anyway. And if she's having a miscarriage, it's very likely that there's biochemical conditioning playing and etc. that has dissolved the fetus. As Michael quite rightly said 2 days ago, it felt like 2 years ago, Michael, but it was actually 2 days ago, that we're more stringent just to make sure that it's safe, that it's 14 days if a fetus that has passed away is not discernible. If the sex is discernible, then you obviously keep the 7 days appropriate for a boy and 14 days appropriate for a girl for the mother's tumah period. Now, how does it happen that it happens over 2 days? Very simple. It's that towards the end of the first day, there might be a half an hour before sunset. Part of the amniotic sac is coming out. The remainder comes out just after sunset. So halachically, it's a new day. It doesn't have to stretch out to a huge period of time. So what Rav Ulla said is we can always assume that the fetus has been dissolved equally, because otherwise there's a double suffix, a double question. What's the double question? How much of the amniotic sac has emerged from the woman, meaning you only count the tumah period from the majority. And the second question is how much of the dissolved fetus is on the part of the sac that's come out compared to the percentile of the fetus that's dissolved that's still in the amniotic sac that's within the mother's body. So Rav Ulla said it's evenly distributed. It's just easier that way for the sake of, I'm paraphrasing, for the sake of argument. Okay, so what happens is in a human woman, you observe 15 days technically. Why? We count from the first day, so that even if she's in a state of purity, because the majority of the amniotic sac only comes on the second day, then you don't have to count the first day. You know, it's a life stressful experience for her. So you're not sitting there with calipers and tape measures. You're trying to save her life and the baby's life. That's the only important thing. The other thing is secondary. So we're then assuming that just to be safe, on the first day you call her tumah, not tarhor. She's impure, not pure. And because of that, she cannot, it's not about only sexual relations with her husband. She cannot touch utensils, clothing, people, etc., because it will render food and drink tamei, utensils. So she can't prepare anything for that period of time for the 15 days. So we technically count from the second day, and we add the first day just as a stringency, because if we had to come from the first day to be stringent, Rava said, explaining Rav Ulla, he would come to be lenient because she'd be tahor one day early when in fact she was in a state of tumah, impurity. So Rava is not coming to challenge Ulla. It was a different time period. He's coming to explain Ulla. So he just turned around and said that Ulla is actually meaning that we count from the second day, but we add the first day just to be sure, 15 days in total. Kevin wanted to know what this has to do with the animal. Well, very clearly, the animal's physiology is different. And what we're saying, the Gemara is basically saying, well, why couldn't we learn this? Why did we need the statement from Rav Ulla quoting Elazar? Well, very simply, the Mishnah, the Gemara is saying you could have got this from Mishnah 77a in Chulin, right? And the reason being is to discuss an amniotic sac with an animal that's partially out and fully out. Okay, so that's what's discussed. It starts in Chulin 68a. So what gets determined here is as follows: is there two separate physiologies? Why did we learn this? Well, we learned a completely different reason in an animal. When the animal comes out, if it's coming out partially, that period of that portion of the animal that comes out, you can't eat, because the animal, that portion of the animal has already been given birth to. So the principle is as follows, is that you can't eat the fetus that has come out, because if that fetus is dead, you can't shech the already dead animal. And if it's living, you'd have to shech the fetus separately. And the mother's shechting wouldn't cover the fetus if it's deemed born. In other words, it's come out of the mother's womb and the amniotic sac, etc., etc. Fine. So what happens there is that the rabbis have said that technically, if a part of the animals come out, the part that's in the mother, if the mother was shechted, I'm saying who would do that halfway through, but whatever, theory-wise, if it was happening, you still could have the animal that was within the mother, that part of the anatomy. The reason that the rabbis put an edict that you cannot is because an animal's womb works differently. It can almost give birth, in other words, drop the amniotic sac with the animal in and suck up the entire fetus back in the animal's body. So then we'd have no way of knowing if the animal is technically halachically born or part of the mother's anatomy. And because we can't deduce this, because of that animal's unique womb, of the ability to suck back the amniotic sac with a fetus in, we render that it's too difficult to be able to discern such a thing. And therefore, that animal itself is not fit for a Jew to eat within the mother. Does that make sense? Does that make sense so far? Fine. So what does this have to do? What does this have to do with the human mother? That's what Kevin wanted to know. So what this has to do with it is that all we're saying is that you cannot learn. Rav Ulla brings of Rav Elazar that you have to learn this with regard to a human separately, a human woman, because her womb works completely differently to an animal's womb. So the two physiologically are not the same, even though the issue of the dissolved fetus could occur both in an animal womb, amniotic sac, as well as a human amniotic sac. The physiology still is different, very, very different. And the fact of it is, why you learn this is that we want to know in the animal, has the fetus dissolved in the amniotic sac that the animal has given birth to, and is it evenly distributed? And we say we can't learn it from there because the majority of the fetus, the dissolved fetus, could still be in the animal even though the amniotic sac has dropped. So we're saying the physiologies are very different. So Rav Ulla brings of Rav Elazar that you have to learn it separately with a human female, because of the issue of physiological differences. Am I making sense, guys? You can't, the Gemara is asking, why did we need this explanation of Rav Ulla? We could have learned about Chulin. And we're saying the physiology is different and the womb is different. So therefore you can't. Dissolving of fetus and amniotic sac differs with animal and human, as well as the amount of fetus that comes out and the way it comes out. And that's it. That's why we had to learn it separately. Is that all clear, Kev?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fine. Let's go on to the next part. Cat, just leave. This cat is driving me crazy. I can see I have to edit this part of the video. Sorry, guys. Just give me 1 second.
So, Kev, the internet's working pretty well, eh?
Thank you. Thanks for your help, man.
So now you know how to do it in future. You know how to do it in future then.
I just turn on the portable hotspot. That's it.
Yeah.
No, just pay your account. That's all.
The internet's down there. It's the first time at least I got the webcam working. Kevin?
All right. I got rid of that snake with fur.
Well done. Thanks.
Yeah, it's fine to record again.
All right. Sorry, I'm not a cat person. All right. It's not even my cat. Anyway, it comes here all the time. All right, so let's go on to the next case. Guys, I hope I gave you a bottom line. If I've made any mistakes, I've worked from memory. This is my fault. Okay?
It sounds spot on to what you said yesterday.
All right. But my memory is not perfect. Let me just see something here. Yeah, it seems all right. All right. So let's go on 11b1. Right. And Ulla also, this is the third thing we learned. Okay, why is it the third ruling? The first ruling we know was in the case of a thief and a robber, we calculate. In other words, you can put the carcass as a deposit, which is for the principal or compensatory amount plus penalties. This was a lone opinion because we learned that the others say a thief and a robber doesn't get that sort of kind treatment. At the end of the day, they have to go to the schlep of selling the carcass and pay the full principal amount plus penalties. They don't get a reprieve on the principal amount, on the compensatory amount. Fine. So then this amniotic sac was the second issue. The third issue that we're about to learn of Rav Ulla in the name of Rav Elazar. And Ulla said in the name of Rav Elazar, if a firstborn child was killed within 30 days of its birth, one is not required to redeem it. And similarly, Rav Rami Bar Kamma taught, since the verse states, you shall surely redeem, it might have been thought that even a firstborn child that is killed within 30 days, one is required to redeem it. Scripture therefore states, but you shall surely redeem to qualify the requirement, and teach that one need not redeem that child in such a case. All right, so what is it talking about here? Does anybody know? Before I add clarity. Guys?
It sounds horrendous.
I know what you said, but where it's going to, I'm not sure.
Why does it sound horrendous, Gav? We're not saying that anybody's going to be killed. We're not killing anybody. Why is it
you're talking about a child that's come into existence.
Gavin, I'm not saying that anybody's killing the child, man.
No, but what does redeeming mean?
Redeeming?
No, in this particular, I understand redeeming. What does it mean in this case?
It's exactly the same. It's Pidyon Ben. Is that the firstborn child, just like the firstborn animal, you have to generally have it in terms of it has to be dedicated to temple service, etc. You have to redeem it, the firstborn child. Okay, it's a separate discussion in and of its own, but it's Pidyon Ben.
Is it just Pidyon Ben? That's all it is?
Yes, it's the same thing when you have a fast.
Okay, no. If it's another name, I know what Pidyon Ben is. If that's what it is, then I understand. Thank you.
Okay. So, all right, guys, what we're saying is as follows, is that if a firstborn child doesn't make it to 30 days, there's no Pidyon Ben. Okay, so what was a Pidyon Ben? How did it actually work, redemption of the firstborn? All right.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so basically the Torah requires all firstborn sons to be redeemed when they reach the age of 1 month. Okay, and this is in, if you look in the Chumash, in Numbers, chapter 18, verse 15 to 16. That's where it's stated. And it discusses the issue of Pidyon Ben. In order to effect this redemption, you have to take a sum of 5 selas, and it's paid by the father of the child to a coin. Okay? Arthur, remember you had to do this for a Danny when he was born.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So it's normal. If you give birth to a baby boy and it's your firstborn, this is what you have to do. And this is in Mishnah Kedushin in 29a. So Ulla teaches that if a firstborn son is killed before he reaches 30 days, the requirement of redemption does not apply. So why doesn't it apply? Because that Rashi notes that if a son had died naturally before he was a month old, it would not be necessary to explain that he need not be redeemed. Because in Numbers, okay, in chapter 18 on the 16th verse, not the 15th verse, it states that the requirement of redemption applies only to viable children. In other words, those that are capable of living for 30 days or more. So, in other words, Pidyon Ben, if a child that is not going to live up to is not going to live up to that period and dies naturally, then you don't do a Pidyon Ben. What we're saying here is we didn't know in a case where a child might have been killed in an accident. The term in the Gemara means the child is torn. We don't know if it's torn in terms of an accident or if it's torn in the birth process. We're not sure, but it uses the term torn. In other words, the child is accidentally killed, the infant. And we wouldn't know in that case, do we redeem the infant with a Pidyon Ben? Because you don't in the case where the child does not live naturally till 30 days, where there's no accident. It has to be a viable child. Does that make sense? So Rav Ulla, in the name of Rav Elazar, comes to teach that also in the case that a child that's killed, and even if he presumably would have lived for 30 days had he not been killed, that you don't have to give a Pidyon Ben, because he wouldn't have been sure. Any questions? It's very straightforward.
Yeah, no, that's easy.
Okay.
I didn't know what redemption meant in this case. Sorry,
listen, when we daven for spiritual redemption, it's always a good thing. It's never horrific. You know, we want to end Galus and have redemption and go back to Eretz Yisrael. That's not horrific, Gav.
Yeah, no, I misunderstood. It's fine, 100%.
No problem. No one's killing any babies here. Don't worry.
Yeah, no, that's what I thought. I wasn't sure what was going on.
No.
I lost the plot. It's fine. Carry on.
It's okay. We're not Romans. So Rashi brings in Bechorot 49a this entire discussion with Tosfot. Okay, so that's fine. And Numbers starts with chapter 18, verse 15, and it says, you shall surely redeem the firstborn of man. Okay? That's fine. All right, let's go on to the next teaching. Fine. A fourth ruling cited by Rav Ulla in the name of Rav Elazar. And Ulla said in the name of Rav Elazar, large animals are required through drawing near. Okay? Now, what we learn is, I don't know if you guys know the difference in the word Mashicha and Masicha. Guys, did you learn this? I want to test what you've learned.
I did learn it.
I read it, but I also don't. I can't recall the clarity of that. Sorry.
All right, let's explain it. Yeah.
Isn't the difference one is for big and one is for small, and the animals that are for little? It's actually one's big, one's little.
No. It's a good point that Arthur's making, because it does talk about large animals specifically, and it also talks about small, but the process is the same. It's a very good question, Arthur. Process is the same. Michael, what were you going to say?
No, sorry. I thought it had something to do with redemption, but I can't remember. Or to cover or something. No.
So what we're dealing with here is, firstly, let's learn what Mashicha is. Whether we learn about Mashicha or Masira, these are acts of acquisition. If, Michael, I'm having to sell you my ox, you have to pay for the ox and you also have to physically acquire the ox. Okay.
Oh, okay. I remember this part now. Okay, that's kind of
now, Gavin, if you make payment, an acquisition is not always necessary. You get what I'm saying? But sometimes it takes time to get money together. So you have to make an act of acquisition so that it's like signing a contract. So generally, when you look at marriage, there are three acts. There's the act of acquisition with the wedding ring. There's a shtar, a contract, and there's beer, which is a consecration of the marriage sexually. So when you do an acquisition of articles, you generally have a shtar, a contract, you have acquisition, an act of acquisition, and also you have a transfer of money. Now, you don't necessarily need a shtar, a document, if it's really a straightforward thing. With property, you do, but animals, it suffices to have an act of acquisition as well as money transferring hands. So now we're learning in Bava this was in Bava Metzia about acquisitions. Okay, so let's just keep this very, very simple. And Ulla said in the name of Rav Elazar, large animals acquired through drawing near. Now, guys, I know we Arthur got this. Is it just for large animals? It's the same whether it's large animals or small animals. Why is it mentioning large animals here? Well, we're going to see that one of the ways to have a kinyan, an acquisitory act. So an acquisitory act is not to be inquisitive, curious. It's acquisitory, which means to acquire. So what happens is with Mesicha, what happens, how do I explain this in the most simple way, is that it has to transfer the land that it's on. All right, let me give you an example here. So with Mesicha, it says, Bahema Kasa Niknate Bim Shicha. So with Bim Shicha, this is how it works, is that the animal at that time is on the property of who? The owner, the seller, right? So you've got to take the animal from the seller's property to your own property. You have to actually physically take the animal. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So there is a specific area that if the buyer's domain is far away, that there's a public area set aside for temporary use by individuals. It's known as a simta. So a simta is an area where you can take it from the seller's property, and you can draw the animal into a simta, which is a public area designated for temporary use, at which you're transferring the location. But the ideal location, if it's not far, is to take that animal into your location. That's the physical act of acquisition, right? And this can be found in Kedushin 22b. Now, it does define the difference between two animals. There's a large animal, so that's Bahema Gasa, which is a thick animal. And those animals are cattle, horses, donkeys, and mules. And then you have Bahema Daka, which is actually a thin animal. And those sort of animals are like sheep and goats. So both of them are required through Mashiach or drawing near, because you're drawing the animal near to your domain. Okay, good. Now, there's a discussion on a dissenting opinion, because in another place in Kedushin, we say we've learned in the Mishnah that large animals can be acquired through Masira, not Masicha, Masira. So we want to know, what is this Masira and where is it found? So this Masira is found in Kedushin 25b. Masicha is found in Kedushin 22b. So what's Masira? Masira means handing over. So that consists of the owner handing over the animal reins. You know, a rein is what you use to steer a horse. If you turn to the left or turn to the right, it's two pieces of, what do you call it? There's a bit around the animal's mouth, and you direct the animal left or right. So the seller has to give the buyer the reins, and then that's an act of acquisition, and or he has to give him the mane of the animal. The mane of the animal is, in certain animals, the horse has a mane. If the animal doesn't have its rein on with the bit in its mouth, you can do it. I wouldn't advise you ride a horse by yanking on its mane, because you're not going to get the most out of the horse. You're going to end up like Christopher Reeve. So don't do that. But for an act of acquisition, it's okay. Now, the whole discussion in Kedushin 22b is whether the reins must actually be handed over, or whether it suffices that the seller instruct the buyer to take hold of the reins. Okay? And then it goes and discusses in 25b. So it appears that there's two different arguments. The one is that when you're moving from the seller's to the buyer property, or you put it to the public domain in the designated area, as we discussed, the simta. And the second one is when the seller gives the buyer the reins of the animal, and the buyer takes hold of it, or the seller instructs the buyer to take the reins of the animal. So we're saying there seems to be a contradiction with the two different brises according to different Tanaic opinions. And this is to clarify your question. Ulla issued a ruling in accordance with this other Tana, for it says in a brisa, but the sages say both these and these. What does it mean? Both large and small animals are acquired through Mashiach. While Rav Shimon says both these and these, meaning small and large animals, are required through lifting. So the only one that's got a dissenting opinion is Rav Shimon. So let's look at it like this, okay? There's Masicha, which is taking an animal from the seller's domain to the buyer's domain, or the Sicha, which is the public domain allocated for such acquisitions, or Masira, which is another form of acquisition by taking the reins or the mane of the animal that the seller gives it to the buyer. And there's a contradiction in terms of which way is correct. Rav Shimon has got a completely different opinion and says both the small and large animals are acquired through lifting. So it's easy to realize how to lift a small animal. You physically lift it up like lifted up that cat earlier on, but you can't lift an ox up. So how does Rav Shimon say we lift up an ox? You have to elevate the ground. So what you do is you put a whole lot of branches and twigs and create a ramp for the animal to go through. Now, why is he saying this? Because technically you're removing it from where? The seller's property. By lifting the animal up, you're taking it onto yourself from the seller's property. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it is an act of acquisition.
Okay.
So Ulla says that he goes with the opinion of Mashiach, meaning you draw it from the public domain to the domain of the buyer, or the seller's domain to the domain of the buyer, or that public domain sifcha that's reserved for these sort of transactions. Does that make sense?
Perfect.
Yeah.